isn't. There we go. Good. Okay, welcome back. I hope those of you who are here in the afternoon enjoyed French Day here at Noir City. That was fabulous. Those were two really terrific films. And now we're about to do a 180 because you're going to Detroit. We left Paris and now you're on your way to Detroit. Before I forget, yes, the Film Noir Foundation, under whose auspices this festival is presented, we are doing another donation drive tonight. So if you are compelled, if you like the programming and you're compelled to help us rescue and restore films, you can donate out there with the fabulous Darl Sparks at the Film Noir Foundation table, and there will be a random drawing amongst those donors, and the prizes tonight, they've all been pretty good, but tonight, Blu-rays of two classic noir films, Out of the Past and Dark Passage, are the two Blu-rays that our friends at the Warner Archive collection have given us for promotional purposes. So I would appreciate it if you donate. Thank you. Okay, the movie you're about to see. It's not often at a film noir festival that I present a film where I get to say, hey, I saw this when it came out originally. But tonight I actually get to say that. I saw this movie in San Francisco upon its release. And I saw it, when it came out, it was obviously sold as a Richard Pryor comedy. And I saw this with a predominantly African-American audience, and I thought they were going to burn the theater down by the end of it. Because it is pretty incendiary. And by the end, I had never heard so many people screaming back at the screen in a movie theater. I find this movie to be every bit as timely today as when it was first released. It concerns itself with issues that are still very much at the fore of American culture. The story of its making is really fascinating because this is the directorial debut of Paul Schrader, who I interviewed several years ago, and I asked him to write his own entry in the Film Encyclopedia, to which he said, "You mean my obituary?" I said, "Yeah, I guess it kind of is your obituary." He said, "Well, the first line is going to be, this is the guy who wrote Taxi Driver, Paul Schrader, author of the Oscar-nominated screenplay Taxi Driver, blah, blah, blah." But his background, before he became the guy who wrote Taxi Driver, is so fascinating because, he grew up in Michigan in a Calvinist family, and did not really, motion pictures were not part of his upbringing. So it was very late in his adolescence that he actually started watching movies, and he kind of became obsessed with this whole thing and ended up in film school in Southern California and was part of that whole era of 1970s, young guys fresh out of film school, along with John Milius and George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Scorsese, all these guys, who really changed American movies. But Schrader was one of the few guys who started as a writer and not as a director. So he wrote a number of really terrific screenplays in the 1970s. And I remember being, he's not that much older than me, honestly. And I remember when he sold his screenplay for the Yakuza, this film that was clearly a homage to combining Japanese samurai movies with film noir, and he got Takakura Ken and Robert Mitchum together to make this film, and it sold for the highest price ever paid for a screenplay, on spec in Hollywood. And this put Schrader on the map, and then he wrote Obsession for Brian De Palma, his Hitchcock homage, and he wrote a fabulous exploitation film called Rolling Thunder, if anybody knows that one of Quentin Tarantino's favorite movies. And he was just a machine. He was just pumping out these screenplays like a kid who had never grown up watching movies, and then suddenly it was in his blood, and he was obsessed, and he just churned these things out. culminating in Taxi Driver, after he had driven a cab for a while and had these experiences and channeled it all into that amazing screenplay. Then he did this with his brother Leonard. He wrote the screenplay for Blue Collar as his first film. And I really, to this day, I think this is one of the great debut films ever. And it was so unlike what everybody else was doing at the time, because it is a film that is utterly devoid of style. There is no style in this movie whatsoever. This is a movie directed by a writer. And he barely lived through it. Because obviously Richard Pryor was the linchpin of this whole thing. Paul Schrader got to become a director thanks to Richard Pryor agreeing to make this movie, because back then he was as hot as a pistol. And of course Harvey Keitel had just made Mean Streets and Taxi Driver with Scorsese, and he stepped in to play the white guy in this movie. And Yaphet Kotto, who is the third member of the crew that are going to try to pull off this heist in the film. And these three guys hated each other when they were making this movie. I won't go into the gruesome details, but you want to talk about a baptism by fire for a first-time filmmaker. Imagine trying to direct Richard Pryor. I mean, really, at one point, Pryor pulled a gun on Paul Schrader and said, "I don't do more than 3 fucking takes." and it was like, wow, okay, that's great. And somehow he got this movie out of this incredible, painful cauldron of hostility that existed between these guys. And it's remarkable, as you will see. So how many people in the audience have not seen Blue Collar before? Okay, this is good. So this may be the only time this movie has been shown at a film noir festival, and it really only qualifies, I mean, it's dark. It's dark. So, it's interesting how many people came to this movie originally thinking it was going to be a funny, funky Richard Pryor comedy, and by the last 30 minutes, it's like, oh my God. It's the heist thing makes it work, but as I said, I will take any excuse to show this film, because I just think it's a masterpiece in a lot of ways. It's a masterpiece. And so, good on you, Paul Schrader. You made a film that all these years later still applies more than ever. So, I can't say enjoy Blue Collar, but buckle up, and here comes Blue Collar.